the Russian Mafia's most brutal torture methods. River disposal. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Russians thought they were getting freedom. What they got instead was a brutal dictatorship by the Russian Mafia. One of the most horrible torture methods used was the river disposal, better known as the concrete shoes. And it's exactly what it sounds like. This method became popular with Russian organized crime groups, especially around the port towns like St. Petersburg and Vladivostok. The process was simple, but absolutely terrifying. The Mafia would tie you up, often whilst you'd still be breathing, and encase your feet in concrete. After 10 minutes, the wet mix would harden, and you'd be driven out to a river, lake, or if the Mafia was feeling fancy, the Black Sea. When you're dragged to the edge of a river with your legs tied to heavy blocks, your brain knows what's coming long before the water even touches your skin. The moment you're pushed in, the weight of the concrete drags you straight to the bottom, and the cold water does the rest. Here's the thing about the concrete shoes. Russia has a lot of water. The Volga River alone is over 2,000 miles long. And during the chaotic post-Soviet era of the 90s, bodies were turning up in rivers all across the country. In 1993 alone, Moscow police reported finding over 400 bodies in the Moscow River, and that's just the ones they found. The concrete shoes method was not just about silencing competition. It was about making them disappear completely. No body, no crime, no questions. Families would spend years wondering what happened to their loved ones, never getting closure. The psychological impact on communities was massive. Everyone knew what the concrete shoes meant. If someone went missing and was connected to the wrong people, everyone knew that they were in a cold, icy grave at the bottom of a river. Now we're seriously stepping up the brutality. Welcome to the jacket, or as it's known in some circles, the tire necklace. If concrete shoes was about making people disappear quietly, the jacket is about making sure everyone knows what happens when you cross the Mafia. This method originated in South Africa during the apartheid era, but Russian organized crime groups adopted it in the late 90s and early 2000s, particularly in the southern regions and in Chechnya during the chaos of war. The jacket isn't some nice piece of clothing. It's a car tire filled with gasoline squeezed around your neck and shoulders. Here's how it went down. You'd be grabbed by enforcers, sometimes in public, sometimes in a warehouse. They'd force a tire around your head and around your torso, pour diesel fuel all over it, and then light it and you up. The rubber would burn at around 200 degrees Celsius, melting onto your skin, while the gasoline created an inferno you couldn't escape from. One documented case from 2003 in Grozny involved a man accused of being an informant. Witnesses reported that he was jacketed in the middle of a public square as a warning to others who might think about cooperating with authorities. The man survived for almost 4 minutes before succumbing to his burns and smoke inhalation. 4 minutes may not sound like a long time, but when you're on fire, every second feels like an eternity. The worst part about the jacket? You can't remove it. The tire is too heavy and too tight. Your hands are usually tied, but even if they weren't, the moment you touch that burning rubber, your hands are gone too. You're trapped in a prison of fire, and everyone around you has to watch as you burn alive. The blowtorch. This method strikes fear all across Russia to this day. During the height of Russian organized crime in the 90s and 2000s, blowtorches became a favorite tool for extracting information. They weren't particularly sophisticated, but they were extremely effective, terrifying, and readily available. You could buy an industrial blowtorch at any hardware store, no questions asked. The method was simple, but absolutely brutal. The victim was tied to a chair, and interrogators would use the blowtorch on various parts of their body until they gave up information, money, or whatever the Mafia wanted. Fingers, feet, and even the face. Nothing was off limits. One particularly horrific scene came to light in 2008, when Russian authorities arrested members of a St. Petersburg crime syndicate. During the investigation, they found a warehouse that had been converted into a torture chamber. Blowtorches, pliers, and other tools were found, along with a survivor who described having a blowtorch held to his feet for over 20 minutes until he revealed the location of money he had supposedly stolen. Let's talk about what a blowtorch actually does to human tissue. An industrial blowtorch burns at about 1,100 degrees Celsius. When applied to skin, it doesn't just burn your cells, it straight up vaporizes them. The moisture in your tissue instantly turns to steam, causing the flesh to bubble and char. The pain is so intense that victims often pass out within seconds, which is why interrogators would apply the torch in short bursts, keeping you conscious and able to talk. The blowtorch wasn't just used to cause pain, but to send a message to the community. Even if you somehow survived the interrogation, you'd carry gruesome scars forever. Missing fingers, disfigured faces, and burned feet that would never heal properly. You became a walking advertisement of what happens when you mess with the Russian mafia. The chainsaw. This method was reserved for the worst of the worst, a punishment only the most infamous victims received. The chainsaw became notorious in the Russian mafia wars of the 90s, especially among Chechen gangs and rival factions fighting for territory. One well-documented case from 1997 involved a Moscow businessman who refused to pay protection money to a local crime boss. He was kidnapped, taken to an abandoned factory outside the city, and interrogated for information about his finances. When he refused to cooperate, they brought out the chainsaw. According to court testimony from eyewitnesses, they started by dismembering his legs while he was still conscious, working their way up his body until he died from shock or blood loss. What makes this method absolutely horrific is that the chainsaw isn't a clean cutting tool. It's a serrated chain moving at high speed designed to rip through wood. When applied to human flesh and bone, it doesn't cleanly cut, but instead, it tears and grinds through. The pain is beyond description. You're simultaneously experiencing massive tissue damage, shattering bones, and catastrophic blood loss. The aftermath of chainsaw executions was deliberately public. Body parts would be left in public places, outside businesses, and in rival territories as a warning. In Vladivostok during the late 90s, there was a period where dismembered remains were appearing so frequently that locals called it the body part summer. That's how normalized this brutality had become. The pit. We've now arrived at number 1, the most brutal method on this list, the pit. The mafia doesn't use this kind of torture to physically destroy your body. The goal is to annihilate your mind. During the lawless years following the collapse of the Soviet Union, some Russian organized crime groups took over abandoned buildings, old Soviet prisons, and even dug underground chambers in houses specifically for long-term imprisonment and torture. If you particularly pissed off the Russian mafia, you'd be thrown into an underground chamber or even a literal hole in the ground, with no light, no heat, and no food. You'd be left there for days, weeks, or possibly months on end. The goal wasn't to quickly get rid of you, but to give you plenty of time to question your life choices as you slowly withered away. One survivor, whose testimony was documented by human rights investigators in 2004, described being held in a pit for 23 days outside of Yekaterinburg. He said the chamber was about 2 meters by 2 meters, with a dirt floor, no light, and temperatures that dropped below freezing at night. Food came once every few days, just enough to keep him alive. A piece of bread and some water. But the worst part wasn't the hunger or the cold, it was the rats. Let's talk about rats for a second. These furry animals are survivors. They thrive in darkness, they're attracted to warmth and food, and when you're trapped in a pit with them, you become both. The survivor described waking up to rats biting his feet, his hands, trying to nibble at any exposed skin. He'd fight them off, but there were too many, and he was too weak. Shockingly, the physical suffering wasn't even the worst part. It was the isolation, the darkness, and the complete sensory deprivation. Studies on solitary confinement have shown that just a few days of complete isolation can cause hallucinations, paranoia, and permanent psychological damage. Imagine months of it. Russian organized crime used the pit specifically for people they wanted to break completely. Informants, rival gang members, and business owners who refused to sell their properties. They'd throw you in the pit, and when they pull you out, you weren't the same person anymore. Other methods on this list killed you in hours or days. The pit killed you over weeks and months, piece by piece. until there was nothing left but a shell. Do you want to see more dark history content like this? Check out the other videos. We've got plenty more where this came from. See you in the next one!